He didn't forget to close the safe. He left it wide open on purpose. It was a trap, a final test for the only person who had managed to walk into his world without being consumed by greed. Charles Whitmore hadn't always been this guarded, this suspicious. There was a time when his name held weight in Manhattan's elite circles, carved into building foundations, spoken in boardrooms, printed in Forbes headlines. He was the voice behind a construction empire that built half of New York's skyline, a billionaire who once rivaled the giants. But that trust, once freely given, had been shattered by those closest to him. Now, at 45, suspicion was his only faithful companion. Suspicion didn't steal. Suspicion didn't betray. And above all, suspicion didn't leave him bankrupt and broken. Charles lived in a sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble, art worth more than most people's homes. 12 rooms, 24 hidden cameras, and enough security to protect a small country. But the silence was deafening. No laughter echoed through the halls except the ghost of memories. People called him paranoid, bitter, impossible to work for. They didn't know his business partner had embezzled millions while shaking his hand at company meetings. They hadn't seen the forged contracts signed by his own brother. They didn't know his ex-wife had cleaned out their joint accounts the same day she filed for divorce. And they never met Sarah, his daughter, the light of his life, who died in a car accident at 16. The accident happened because Charles was working late again, couldn't pick her up from school, so she took a ride from a friend who'd been drinking. The guilt ate at him daily. He'd built an empire but lost everything that mattered. Since then, trust became a luxury Charles couldn't afford. He'd rather be alone than betrayed again. Charles had gone through 17 housekeepers in 2 years. They either quit from his impossible standards or were fired for asking too many questions, touching things they shouldn't, or simply being too friendly. He preferred the cold efficiency of strangers to the warm betrayal of friends. Then the agency sent him Amara Johnson's file. 29 years old, single mother, worked 3 jobs to support her disabled son. No social media presence, no criminal background, references that spoke of quiet dedication rather than charm. When she arrived for the interview, she didn't try to impress him with small talk. She asked direct questions. What rooms are off limits? What cleaning products do you prefer? Do you want reports on anything unusual I might notice? It was professional, respectful, exactly what Charles thought he wanted. But Charles Whitmore didn't hire people without insurance. Everyone got tested. Everyone. On Amara's 3rd day, Charles made his move. He retreated to his private study and opened the wall safe behind his desk. Inside, stacks of $100 bills, diamond jewelry, gold coins, and sensitive documents. He arranged it all carefully, making it look naturally accessible. Then he left the safe door wide open and retreated to his surveillance room. At exactly 9 a.m., Amara entered the penthouse with her usual quiet efficiency. Charles watched through multiple camera angles as she moved through her routine. Dusting, organizing, never touching anything personal or valuable. For 90 minutes, she worked with mechanical precision. Then, she entered his study. Charles leaned forward, watching the monitor intensely. This was the moment. This was when Amara would reveal her true nature, just like all the others. She froze when she saw the open safe. Her eyes widened. Her hand went to her chest. This is it, Charles thought. Here comes the disappointment. But Amara didn't step closer to the money. She didn't even look around to see if anyone was watching. Instead, She immediately pulled out her phone and dialed. Charles watched, confused, as Amara spoke into the phone. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Amara. I'm cleaning your study and noticed your safe is open. I wanted to make sure you knew before I continued working in this room." Charles stared at the screen. No one had ever called to report an open safe before. They either ignored it or took from it. He told her he'd handle it and hung up, but continued watching. Amara stepped completely out of the study and positioned herself in the hallway where she could see both entrances, like a guard. She wasn't protecting the safe from intruders. She was protecting Charles from her own temptation. Interesting, Charles thought. But people change when the stakes get higher. As if the universe wanted to test Amara further, her phone rang. Charles watched her face crumble as she answered. "What do you mean seized?" Amara whispered, her voice breaking. "The medical equipment?" "All of it." Charles zoomed in on her face as tears formed in her eyes. Through the surveillance audio, he caught fragments. $8,000. Insurance won't cover. Malik needs those machines to breathe. Amara sank against the wall, still guarding the study entrance. Her son's medical equipment had been repossessed. $8,000 would get it back, the exact amount sitting in neat stacks just 20 feet away. Charles held his breath. Now we'll see her true character. Amara sat in that hallway for 47 minutes. Charles watched every second. She stared at the open safe door, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking with the weight of impossible choices. Then she did something that shook Charles to his core. Amara pulled out a small notepad and began writing. When she finished, she folded the paper, walked into the study, passed all that money, and placed the note on Charles's desk. Then she gently pushed the safe door closed until she heard it lock. She returned to the hallway and continued her vigil, protecting what wasn't hers while her own world crumbled around her. Charles retrieved the note through another camera angle. It read, "Mr. Whitmore, I closed your safe to keep your belongings secure. I understand if you prefer to handle your own security from now on. Thank you for trusting me with your home. Amara." She thinks I'm going to fire her, Charles realized. She's protecting my money and expecting to lose her job for it. But Amara's day wasn't over. As she finished cleaning, another call came in. This time, Charles could hear both sides through his advanced surveillance system. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Mercy General Hospital. Malik's condition has worsened without his equipment. We need to discuss arrangements if you can't resolve the payment situation by tonight." The words hit Amara like physical blows. Arrangements. They were talking about her son's life. Amara collapsed in the hallway, her professional composure finally breaking. She sobbed quietly, her whole body shaking with grief and desperation. And still, she didn't go back to that safe. Charles found himself gripping his desk, his heart racing. He'd designed this test to reveal greed, selfishness, the rot he believed existed in everyone. Instead, he was witnessing a kind of integrity he'd forgotten existed. This woman was choosing to watch her world burn rather than steal from him. She was protecting his wealth while her son's life hung in the balance. For the first time in years, Charles Whitmore felt ashamed. Here was a billionaire testing a woman who made in a year what he spent on lunch, and she was the one teaching him about honor. Charles left his surveillance room and walked slowly toward the study. His footsteps echoed through the empty penthouse. A sound Amara knew meant her employer was coming. She quickly wiped her eyes, straightened her clothes, and stood at attention. Even in her darkest moment, she maintained her professionalism. When Charles appeared in the hallway, Amara's voice was steady, despite the tears still glistening on her cheeks. "Mr. Whitmore, I've finished the cleaning. I left a note on your desk regarding the safe." Charles studied her face. The woman standing before him had just sacrificed everything: her son's health, her family's future, maybe even her child's life, to protect his money, and she was apologizing for it. "Amara," he said quietly, "why didn't you take the money?" Amara looked confused by the question. "Sir, the safe. You knew it was open. You knew I wouldn't miss a few $1,000s. Your son is dying, and you could have saved him. Why didn't you take what you needed?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Amara's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You left it open on purpose." "It wasn't a question." Charles nodded slowly. "Everyone gets tested, Amara. Everyone. I needed to know who you really were when you thought no one was watching." Amara's face went through a storm of emotions: hurt, betrayal, anger, understanding. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Because it wasn't mine to take. Because my son wouldn't want to be saved with stolen money. Because my mother raised me to believe that integrity is the only thing poverty can't take from you and wealth can't buy for you." She paused, gathering strength. "And because someone has to prove that not everyone has a price, even if it costs me everything." Charles felt something crack inside his chest, the wall he'd built around his heart over years of betrayal and loss. "Amara, in the past 5 years, I've been stolen from, lied to, betrayed by family, friends, and business partners. I'm worth $2.3 billion, and I've learned to trust no one. I designed this test believing that everyone would fail it, that everyone would choose money over morals when the stakes were high enough." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook. "You didn't just pass my test. You taught me something I thought I'd never believe again: that good people still exist, that integrity isn't dead, that trust is possible." He wrote out a check and handed it to her. "Not for $8,000, for $80,000. "This isn't payment for passing a test," Charles said. "This is an investment in the kind of person I want to be again." Amara stared at the check, then gently tried to hand it back. "Mr. Whitmore, I can't accept this much money." "It's not charity," Charles interrupted. "When you're worth billions, you learn that money reveals character. You protected my wealth while sacrificing your own family's future. You've shown me more loyalty in 3 days than people I've known for decades. This isn't about what you did. It's about who you are." Amara's hands trembled as she accepted the check. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me the chance to prove myself, even if I didn't know I was being tested." Charles smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in years. "Amara, I have a proposition. I've been looking for someone to help me run my charitable foundation. Someone I can trust completely. Someone with unshakable integrity. The job pays well, and it comes with health insurance that would cover Malik's equipment permanently." Amara's legs nearly gave out. I don't understand." "I understand," Charles said. "You reminded me why I started building things in the first place. Not just buildings, but trust. Not just wealth, but relationships. You gave me back something I thought was lost forever: faith in humanity." Have you ever known someone who passed a test of integrity like this? Someone who chose what was right over what was easy, even when it cost them everything? Amara Johnson didn't just save her son that day. She saved a bitter man's soul. She proved that integrity isn't a luxury for the wealthy or a burden for the poor. It's a choice available to everyone in every moment, when nobody's watching. Charles had spent years believing that everyone would betray him, given the right circumstances. Amara proved that some people would rather lose everything than compromise their character. She didn't just pass his test, she helped him pass his own test of whether he could learn to trust again. Sometimes, the poorest person in the room is the richest in character. Sometimes the person with the most to lose is the least likely to take what isn't theirs. And sometimes, when we're testing others, we discover more about ourselves than about them. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that integrity still exists in this world, share it. Hit that like button if you believe character matters more than circumstances. Subscribe if you want more stories that restore your faith in humanity. And in the comments, tell us about someone whose integrity surprised you. Someone who chose to do right when they could have easily done wrong. Because these stories matter. They remind us that in a world that often rewards the wrong things, there are still people who choose to be good simply because it's right. Amara Johnson could have solved all her problems in 30 seconds. Instead, she chose 30 years of peace with her conscience. That's the kind of wealth that changes the world, one honest choice at a time. Thank you for watching, and remember, the most valuable things in life can't be kept in a safe.